As far back as I can remember, I've always loved movies. What's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and welcome back to another video. So today, I'm talking about my earliest movie memories. I've been feeling weirdly nostalgic lately, and I wanted to reminisce on some of my earliest experiences that I remember going to the movie theater, or even renting a movie from Blockbuster or Hollywood Video and watching it at home. And I've got about 10 or so different movies with some stories to share with them. Before I dive into this though, be sure to hit that like button and comment down below movies that you remember watching at a very young age. Subscribe and hit that notification bell to help reach my goal of 150,000 subscribers here on the channel. And of course, if you guys want to watch movies and TV shows with me, you can do so on my Patreon. I do commentary tracks for various movies and shows over there. And I've got lots of fun, exciting content planned throughout the summer, including live Q&As exclusively to Patreon. Any support goes a very long way over there. So I've been asked before, Chris, what is the first movie you remember seeing in theaters? And honestly, I don't know for a fact the first movie I saw. My parents tell me it was Tarzan, but I feel like they have it mixed up with my brother because that movie came out the year I was born, and I doubt they would have taken me to see a movie when I was under a year old. So honestly, my go-to answer for a while now has been Finding Nemo, which came out in 2003. It's become a beloved Pixar classic, and I've probably seen this movie over 100 times throughout my entire childhood. It's one of those movies that in elementary school the teachers would throw on almost every year, multiple times a year, to celebrate the end of the year or summer break, or just to have on in the background. So I know this movie like the back of my hand, but I remember vividly the first time I saw it in theaters. I'm pretty sure I even know the theater it was at. I won't name drop it here, but I remember sitting in that theater when it went pitch black about halfway through the movie when Dory and Marlin are really in the depths of the ocean, and that one fish that has like the stem coming out of its head with the light in front of it starts to lure them in. That scene really stands out in my mind. Like, I remember being a kid and watching it on the big screen. And another scene that really stands out is when the whale with the big like brush teeth comes into the frame and they get swallowed by the whale. That stands out to me as well. I don't know what psychology term it is, but there's just random frames from that movie that I remember seeing in the theater. They are burned into my brain forever. And to this day, it's still one of the best Pixar films. In my recent Letterboxd reviews, like the last time I rewatched it, I said, I've seen this movie almost too many times now. And I firmly believe there's those movies we all have where you've seen them so much that it almost starts to take the joy out of it because you've seen the movie a million times throughout all different phases of your life. And so it's like you can almost get sick of it in a way. Even though the movie's great, it's just like in terms of my favorites, I don't have it as high as I once did because I'm almost worn out on watching Finding Nemo. I still appreciate the movie so much and have those images burned into my brain from when I first saw it in the theater at a very young age of like 3 or 4 years old. But still, I don't find myself revisiting it as much as I used to. The next movie is a bit of an obscure pick, but I'm sure some of you guys saw this in theaters or have seen it, and that movie is Robots. It came out in 2005, and the reason I bring up this film is because it's the first time I saw the trailer for Revenge of the Sith in theaters. It came out in 2005 in March. Revenge of the Sith came out in May, and I remember going to the old theater in my hometown. This is obviously before we had recliners and reserved seating, and I was with my mom, my brother, and I think one of my brother's friends. And I remember watching the movie, and of course there's a few scenes that stand out in my brain. There's one scene I want to say it's this movie that deals with dominoes, and there's like tons of them. Accidentally knocks it over or something, and it's like this humongous domino pattern plays out. It's really obscure, I know. But when I walked out of the theater, I remember obviously talking about the movie, but Revenge of the Sith's trailer stood out to me. I would not shut up about that thing in the car ride home. In retrospect, it's one of those trailers that spoiled the entire movie. I don't know why movie trailers did that. Like, it legitimately shows us the duel between Obi-Wan and Anakin. Anakin's turned to the dark side. Like, we knew all this was coming in Revenge of the Sith, but it shows way too much in that trailer. And it's funny because I wasn't allowed to see Revenge of the Sith in theaters. So even though I wasn't allowed to go see the movie in theaters because it was PG-13 and I was 5 years old, I ended up getting to watch it once we rented it. But regardless, I was like over the moon because it was like seeing Revenge of the Sith in theaters without actually seeing it in theaters. And so I remember vividly, you know, the end of that trailer with the score playing and Obi-Wan and Anakin looking at each other on Mustafar, like vividly remember that trailer. And so I associate Robots with the Revenge of the Sith trailer. And speaking of Star Wars, the earliest movie memories I have are often associated with the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. My family had the films on VHS and then upgraded to DVD at one point. And as a kid, I was obsessed with Star Wars. I'll insert some photos here of me getting Star Wars gifts, you know, around the holiday season or dressing up as Darth Vader for Halloween. I was obsessed with Star Wars, and I had this big bucket of toys as a kid that I would get a new toy and I'd throw it in there, and I would always play with those toys like every day, setting up this big battle scene where I would have, you know, the made-up teams in my brain. Like, I would defy the logic of Star Wars oftentimes and have, like, a bounty hunter with a Jedi, and sometimes I would make, you know, a Sith with a Jedi. It just depends on my mood. But I had this imagination that just ran wild, and I got the Millennium Falcon one year, and that was the coolest thing ever. I had, you know, a Clone Wars gunship from the second film, and I would often watch the Star Wars films, pause the movie at a scene that I really liked. If I had the action figures of the characters, I would then hit play and I would reenact like a lightsaber duel. One that stands out to me is in The Phantom Menace, Duel of the Fates. I would often reenact that with my toys. Another one would even be, weirdly enough, Return of the Jedi, the Jabba's palace scene when Luke finally, you know, breaks out, R2 launches him his lightsaber. That whole scene I would reenact. The list goes on and on. I would just have the Star Wars movies on in the background while I'd be playing with my toys. And in one of the movies on VHS had this like intro where C-3PO is like taking us through the timeline of Star Wars. Looking back, sort of fuzzy memories, but regardless, I loved Star Wars growing up, and I still do really hold the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy really in high regard. I just don't care about a lot of the newer Star Wars stuff, unfortunately. But Star Wars was there for me in my formative years and there for me in my youth at a very, very young age. So I really do credit so much to Star Wars for my love of movies and even having this channel, to be honest. Here's another random movie for you, The Road to El Dorado. It's a DreamWorks film that I want to say came out in 2000 to 2003, and I rented the movie from Blockbuster or Hollywood Video. And I was watching it, I was enjoying it. For some reason, DreamWorks felt like a little too above my age at the time, like it was almost too mature or edgy. But regardless, when I was watching the movie, there's a scene where there's a human sacrifice, and I think I ended up just crying. I was like 3 years old, and I had no clue what I was watching, but it made me really uncomfortable, and I think I stopped watching the movie there, maybe I finished, but either way, it traumatized me ever so slightly in the moment, and when I was writing down, like, what movies do I remember watching as a kid, that one popped in my brain, and I was like, what a wild movie to show kids. What a wild movie to be made with the kid audience. There's human sacrifices, like, what are we doing here? Really dark stuff. When it comes to Disney, of course, I watched The Lion King growing up. I had this DVD that was released, I think in 2004 or 2005, that added a song, and it was The Morning Report with Simba and Zazu. And it was always really just the worst part of the movie. And so as I got older, I somehow convinced myself that it was always in the movie. But then I remember when I got the Blu-ray, it didn't have that scene, and I was just like, hell yes, we won. Like, why did they add this random out-of-place song into the already perfect Lion King? Beats me. It was probably a gimmick to sell more copies of the DVD. I also had The Lion King 2 Simba's Pride on VHS. It was one of those plastic VHS cases, and I watched the hell out of that movie. I would sing the soundtrack all the time, and I also had Lion King 1.5 on DVD. I was a big Lion King kid, and I still adore the film so much. Though I haven't revisited the sequels in quite some time. The live-action remake, we don't talk about. This next one might get me in trouble. I watched Ice Age when I was like 2 to 4 years old, somewhere in that age range, at a family friend's house at the time. This was years ago, and for whatever reason, the person's house we were staying at had like illegal copies of Ice Age and then I think the movie Troy, and so my parents watched Troy and I watched Ice Age with the other kids. And I don't really remember what it looked like, but I imagine if I went back in time, like I had a DeLorean and could go back in time, it would look like someone was recording it in the theater. I guess the person's house we were staying at had worked overseas and somehow acquired a pirated copy of Ice Age before it was out for home release. So at a young age, I was exposed to a life of crime. Oh, that's the only reason I wanted to mention it. Ice Age is a movie I watched a lot growing up, but it was like a pirated movie, and I didn't know any better. I was 3 years old, 4 years old. Man, what a time. I think one of the coolest things growing up, though, was how I had a portable DVD player in my car that would plug into, like, the cigarette lighter. You guys know what I'm talking about. And it would allow you to play DVDs. Well, I had a little stack that I would always bring, and in that stack would usually be the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy. The first, second, third films. I watched the hell out of those movies growing up. Scratched up the DVDs probably. I have them on Blu-ray now, but the Pirates trilogy was my jam growing up, and I remember distinctly watching Dead Man's Chest on almost every single road trip to my grandparents' house. It was about a 4.5 to 5 hour drive all the way down the state of Georgia, and so I would watch Pirates 2 and it would take up a good chunk of that time. Like, I have distinct memories of driving past a Dairy Queen somewhere in South Georgia, and I'm watching Jack Sparrow, Commodore Norrington, and Will Turner hash it out on the wheel. You guys know what I'm talking about in Dead Man's Chest. Like, the Pirates movies have been there for me for decades now, and they were pretty much my go-to car ride movies. And another Disney movie that I watched growing up and have like vague memories of is The Jungle Book. It's one that I've always loved, and to this day it's still a top-tier Disney animated film for me. But I think at my grandparents' house at a very young age, they had the VHS of the classic Jungle Book film, and I remember watching it. There's certain scenes that, like, again, I have quick frames sort of burned into my brain, but I can't remember the context or where exactly I was watching it, but The Jungle Book is definitely one of those movies, and I've revisited it over the years, and every time I watch it, I'll get, like, this deja vu feeling of, like, I feel like I remember watching this when I was 3 years old, and The Jungle Book is definitely up there in terms of childhood movies that I have very vague memories of. And would this really be a complete video if I didn't mention these two movies? Remember the Titans and National Treasure are two that I remember watching distinctly at my very first house, which I moved out of when I was going into the first grade. So I was very young, mind you. And I still remember the day we watched Remember the Titans, exactly where I was sitting, the TV it was on one of those old, big old box TVs. And it really stuck with me because it's still one of my favorite films to date. And of course, I remember watching National Treasure. I remember going to buy the movie. I don't even think it was rented. We just bought it because my parents had already seen it in theaters. And then I came home and I was doing the second disc special edition stuff where you're doing the treasure hunting and trying to decipher the code to find the treasure. What a time. Weirdly enough, I remember my family got new furniture that day, so the smell of the new furniture, like the leather of the chair in the room, I distinctly remember and associate with that crisp new National Treasure DVD. The nostalgia is real with that movie. It really does hold a special place in my heart, and if you guys want to watch it with me, you can do so on my Patreon. But rounding out my earliest movie memories is going to be Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I was about 8 years old when this movie came out in 2008, and it was my first Indiana Jones movie on the big screen, so of course I cherish it. I have so much nostalgia for this film, but even removing that, I think it's wildly overhated. It's much better than Dial of Destiny in my opinion, and it is a worthy enough closure to this story. Of course, the trilogy is perfection, but Crystal Skull still has some great elements. But setting aside my thoughts on the movie itself, I remember the theatrical experience. I didn't go opening weekend. I went a few weeks after the movie had come out, almost a month, I want to say. And so the theater was not empty, but there was only a few other people in there. This was back when movies were in theaters for a lot longer than they are right now. And I remember getting to the theater so early. They were playing like music videos, and one of those was Disturbia, the Rihanna song. But anyway, I cherish my experience with Crystal Skull. It's a movie I got to see in theaters with my dad. It's my first Indiana Jones movie in theaters. I still really do dig this movie despite the overwhelming hatred it receives, but I have such a soft spot for this movie, and I'm honestly probably one of its biggest defenders. But yeah, those are some of my earliest movie memories, from theatrical experiences to watching movies on DVD or VHS. I just wanted to make this video because I was feeling a bit nostalgic lately, and I wanted to revisit some of my favorite early movie memories that I remember. But let me know in the comments down below some of your earliest movie memories, and of course hit that like button, subscribe into that notification bell to help reach my goal of 150,000 subscribers here on the channel. It will mean a lot. And if you want to watch movies and TV shows with me, you can do so on my Patreon, where I drop commentary tracks as well as other exclusive content, including live streams. Your support over there really does mean the world. But that'll do it. Thank you guys as always for watching. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.